Widow finds husband's love letters to another woman, uncovers secret son. Hello, welcome, leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. On a rainy afternoon, Maria stumbles upon a dusty box in the attic, tucked away in a corner she hasn't touched in years. As she opens it, her heart races with a mix of nostalgia and unease. Inside, she finds a stack of old letters, their edges yellowed with time. But as she begins to read, what starts as a bittersweet memory quickly turns into a nightmare. Each word drips with betrayal. Each sentence unravels the life she thought she knew. Who was this man she spent her life with, and what else has he hidden from her? The truth buried in these letters is darker than she could have ever imagined, and it's about to change everything. Maria's world, once so secure, begins to crumble with every revelation. Questions swirl in her mind. How much of her marriage was a lie? And, more terrifyingly, what is she supposed to do with this new knowledge? As she digs deeper, she uncovers a secret that threatens to shatter not just her heart, but the very foundation of her family. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, but this one refuses to remain hidden. Will Maria find the strength to confront the past, or will the weight of the truth be too much to bear? One thing is certain. Once the truth is out, nothing will ever be the same. The relentless patter of rain against the windows seemed to echo the turmoil in Maria Thompson's heart as she stood at the entrance to the attic. It had been exactly 1 year since John's passing, and the weight of his absence hung heavy in the air of their suburban Chicago home. With trembling hands, she grasped the pull cord and tugged, watching as the ladder slowly descended, revealing the dusty shadows above. Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She had avoided this moment for months, but today, on what would have been their 25th wedding anniversary, she knew it was time to face the memories that lurked in the forgotten corners of their shared life. As she climbed the creaky steps, the musty scent of old paper and forgotten dreams enveloped her. The attic was a time capsule, filled with cardboard boxes labeled in John's neat handwriting, Christmas decorations, kids' baby clothes, college yearbooks. Each label was a bittersweet reminder of the life they had built together. Maria's eyes stung with unshed tears as she moved carefully through the cluttered space. Her gaze fell upon John's old guitar case, covered in faded stickers from their cross-country road trip after college. She ran her fingers along its worn surface, remembering how he'd serenade her under the stars at roadside campsites. The memory, once warm and comforting, now felt like a dagger to her heart. As she pushed aside a stack of old National Geographic magazines, Maria's hand brushed against something solid hidden beneath. Curious, she pulled it out, a weathered shoebox, unlabeled and slightly crushed at the corners. Her brow furrowed as she lifted the lid, revealing a stack of envelopes tied together with a faded red ribbon. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she recognized John's handwriting on the top envelope. With shaking fingers, she untied the ribbon and picked up the first letter. The paper felt fragile, as if it might crumble under the weight of its secrets. As her eyes scanned the opening lines, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. My dearest Evelyn, I can't stop thinking about you. Our time together in Boston was too brief, but it has ignited a fire in my soul that I fear will never be extinguished. Maria's knees buckled, and she sank to the dusty floor, her mind reeling. Evelyn? Who was Evelyn? The letter was dated just 3 years into their marriage, when John had been traveling frequently for work. With growing horror and a morbid sense of compulsion, Maria read on, each word another blow to her heart. I know we can never truly be together, but these stolen moments are all that keep me going. When I hold you in my arms, I feel alive in a way I never thought possible. Memories of that time came flooding back, John's late-night phone calls, his distracted behavior when he returned from trips. Maria had attributed it to work stress, never once suspecting. She rifled through the stack of letters, her vision blurring with tears. The correspondence spanned years, detailing a clandestine relationship that had apparently ended only when John's work trips became less frequent. As she neared the bottom of the stack, a photo slipped out. Maria's hand trembled as she picked it up, dreading what she might see. The image showed John, looking younger and carefree, his arm around a striking woman with long dark hair. They were both smiling, their eyes locked on each other with unmistakable affection. Maria felt as if she might be sick. She clutched the photo, her mind spinning with questions and accusations she could never voice to her late husband. How could he have done this? How many times had he lied to her face, all while carrying on this secret life? With a surge of anger, she shoved the letters back into the box, ready to burn them and erase this betrayal from existence. As she did so, a final envelope fell from the stack, its seal unbroken. Unlike the others, this one was addressed to John in unfamiliar handwriting. Against her better judgment, Maria tore it open, her eyes widening as she read. John, I know we agreed to end things, but there's something you need to know. I'm pregnant. The baby is yours. I don't expect anything from you. I know you have a family, but I thought you deserved to know. I won't contact you again. Goodbye, Evelyn. The letter slipped from Maria's numb fingers as the full impact of the revelation hit her. Not only had John betrayed their marriage, but he had fathered a child who would now be in their 20s, living somewhere out in the world. A strangled sob escaped Maria's throat, echoing in the empty attic. She curled into herself, surrounded by the physical remnants of a life she thought she knew. The rain continued to fall outside, indifferent to the storm raging within her heart. As the initial shock began to subside, a new emotion took hold, a burning need to know the truth, to uncover every last detail of John's deception. With tears streaming down her face, Maria gathered the letters and photo, her mind already racing with questions. Who was this child? Did they know about John? Had he known about them all along? As she descended the attic stairs, Maria's grief and betrayal began to crystallize into a grim determination. She would find answers, no matter the cost to her heart or her memories of John. The man she thought she knew had died a year ago, but now she realized that the John she loved had never truly existed at all. Little did Maria know that her decision to uncover the truth would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, family, and forgiveness. As she clutched the box of letters to her chest, she stood at the precipice of a journey that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone connected to John's secret past. The sound of a car door slamming outside startled Maria from her thoughts. Her children would be arriving soon for their weekly family dinner, a tradition that had become even more important since John's passing. As she hastily wiped away her tears and hid the box of letters, Maria realized she now faced an impossible choice: protect her family from this painful truth or pursue the answers she so desperately needed. With a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and headed downstairs, the weight of her newfound knowledge pressing down on her like a physical burden. The woman who descended those stairs was forever changed, her world irrevocably altered by the secrets hidden in forgotten letters. As Maria reached for the front door, steeling herself to greet her children with a smile that belied her inner turmoil, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The search for John's unknown child had begun, and with it, a journey that would test the very foundations of love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. The warm aroma of lasagna wafted through the Thompson family home, a stark contrast to the cold dread that had settled in Maria's stomach. As she mechanically layered pasta and sauce, her mind raced with the earth-shattering revelations from the attic. The cheerful chatter of her children in the living room felt surreal, like a TV playing in another room while her world imploded. "Mom, do you need any help?" called Sarah, her eldest, poking her head into the kitchen. Maria startled, nearly dropping the spatula. "Oh, no, sweetie, I'm almost done. Why don't you set the table?" As Sarah busied herself with plates and cutlery, Maria studied her daughter's familiar features. Did she look anything like her unknown half-sibling? The thought made her nauseous. Dinner was a blur of forced smiles and distracted nods as Maria struggled to focus on her children's updates about work and relationships. Michael, her youngest, was in the middle of a story about his latest software project when Sarah interrupted. "Mom, are you okay? You seem off." Maria's heart raced. "I'm fine, just thinking about your father. Today would have been our anniversary." A somber silence fell over the table. Michael reached out and squeezed her hand. "We miss him too, Mom." The guilt of her secret knowledge weighed heavily on Maria. As she looked at her children's concerned faces, a war raged within her. Should she tell them? Did they have a right to know about their father's betrayal and their potential half-sibling? After the dishes were done and the kids had left, Maria found herself alone with her thoughts and the hidden box of letters. She poured a generous glass of red wine and settled onto the couch, staring at the phone. Who could she talk to about this? Her sister, Kate, had always been her confidant. But even the thought of saying the words out loud made Maria's throat constrict. Her finger hovered over Kate's number before she thought better of it. No, this was too big, too raw to share just yet. Instead, she found herself Googling Evelyn Boston 1999, desperate for any clue about the woman who had captured John's heart. Pages of results flashed before her tired eyes, none seeming to fit. How could she possibly find one woman with only a first name and a city from over 2 decades ago? As the night wore on, Maria's search grew more frantic. She created timelines, cross-referencing John's business trips with the dates on the letters. She scoured old social media posts, looking for any mention of an Evelyn in John's past. Each dead end only fueled her determination. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Maria stumbled upon a promising lead, a photograph from a charity gala in Boston, dated 1999. There, in the background, was a woman who bore a striking resemblance to the one in the photo with John. The caption listed her as Evelyn Reeves, event coordinator. Maria's heart pounded as she typed the name into the search bar. Moments later, she was staring at a LinkedIn profile for an Evelyn Reeves, now working as a marketing executive in Portland, Oregon. The room seemed to spin as Maria grappled with the reality of her discovery. This woman, this stranger, held the key to unraveling the mystery of John's past and their potential child. But what right did Maria have to disrupt Evelyn's life? And what if this was all a horrible mistake? As dawn broke over the Chicago skyline, Maria hadn't slept a wink. She sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of coffee, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from her best friend, Lisa. "Hey, wanna grab lunch today? You seemed quiet at book club last week. Everything okay?" Maria's finger hovered over the keyboard. This was her chance to confide in someone, to share the burden of her discovery. But as she started to type, doubt crept in. What if Lisa judged her for considering this wild goose chase? What if word got back to her kids before she was ready? In the end, she replied with a non-committal, "Thanks, but rain check? Busy day ahead." As she set down her phone, Maria's gaze fell on the family portrait hanging in the hallway. John's smiling face seemed to mock her, hiding secrets she never knew existed. In that moment, she made a decision. She would go to Portland. She had to know the truth, even if it destroyed every memory she held dear. With shaking hands, Maria booked a flight for the following week. As she packed her suitcase, she crafted a careful lie about visiting an old college friend. The deception left a bitter taste in her mouth, but she reasoned it was necessary. She couldn't involve her children, not until she knew for certain what they were dealing with. The night before her departure, Maria found herself once again in the attic, rereading the letters that had upended her world. As she traced John's familiar handwriting, a mix of anger and longing washed over her. How could the man she loved have led this double life? And how had she been so blind? A particular passage caught her eye. "Evelyn, my love, sometimes I dream of a world where we could be together openly, where I could introduce you to my children, where we could build a life without secrets and stolen moments. But I know that's impossible. The pain I would cause, I couldn't bear it. So I'll cherish these brief times we have, knowing they can never be more." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she read. The John in these letters was a stranger to her, passionate, conflicted, and deeply in love with another woman. It shattered everything she thought she knew about their marriage. As she carefully replaced the letters in their box, Maria's resolve strengthened. She would go to Portland, find Evelyn Reeves, and uncover the truth about John's child. Whatever the consequences, she owed it to herself and to her children to know the full story of their family. Little did Maria know that her impulsive trip to Portland would set in motion a chain of events that would test the very foundations of love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. As she zipped up her suitcase, a mix of fear and determination coursing through her veins, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The search for John's unknown child had begun, and with it, a journey that would force Maria to confront painful truths about her past and make impossible choices about her future. As she turned off the lights and tried to sleep, Maria wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or if this quest for answers would ultimately lead to a kind of healing she never thought possible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets of Portland as Maria stepped out of her rental car. She had spent the last 2 days gathering her courage, rehearsing what she might say to Evelyn Reeves. Now, standing before a modest craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood, all her carefully prepared words seemed to evaporate. Maria's hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell. The sound echoed inside the house, followed by approaching footsteps. The door swung open, revealing a woman in her early 50s with familiar dark hair, now streaked with silver. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It was unmistakably the woman from the photograph. "Can I help you?" Evelyn asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Maria swallowed hard. "My name is Maria Thompson. I was John Thompson's wife." The color drained from Evelyn's face. For a moment, the two women simply stared at each other, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. "You'd better come in," Evelyn said quietly, stepping aside. The living room was cozy, filled with books and framed photographs. Maria's eyes were drawn to a picture on the mantel. A young man with John's eyes and Evelyn's smile. Her heart clenched. "That's Lucas," Evelyn said, following Maria's gaze. He's John's son." The confirmation hit Maria like a physical blow. She sank onto the couch, her legs no longer able to support her. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Not until I found the letters." Evelyn sat across from her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I never meant for you to find out. When John died, I thought the secret would die with him." As the afternoon faded into evening, the two women talked. Evelyn shared the story of her relationship with John, the impossible choices they had made, and the son they had brought into the world. Maria listened, her heart breaking anew with each revelation. "Lucas doesn't know about John," Evelyn admitted. I told him his father died before he was born." It seemed kinder than the truth. Maria's mind reeled. Not only did she have a stepson she never knew about, but that son was unaware of his true parentage. The complexity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. As if on cue, the front door opened, and a young man's voice called out, "Mom, I'm home." Panic flashed across Evelyn's face. "Lucas, honey, we have a guest. Can you come in here for a moment?" Lucas appeared in the doorway, his easy smile faltering as he sensed the tension in the room. "What's going on?" Maria stared at the young man before her, drinking in every detail. He had John's jawline, his way of standing. It was like seeing a ghost. Evelyn took a deep breath. "Lucas, this is Maria. She knew your father." Lucas's eyes widened. "My father? But I thought—" "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," Evelyn interrupted, her voice cracking. "There's something I need to tell you." What followed was one of the most painful conversations Maria had ever witnessed. She watched as Lucas's world crumbled around him, his face cycling through shock, anger, and deep hurt as Evelyn revealed the truth about his parentage. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lucas demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "Why did you lie to me my entire life?" Evelyn reached for her son, but he recoiled. "I was trying to protect you," she pleaded. "Protect me?" Lucas scoffed. "By denying me a father? By keeping me from my siblings?" His gaze snapped to Maria. "I have siblings, don't I?" Maria nodded, her throat tight. "A brother and a sister. They don't know about you either." Lucas let out a strangled laugh. This is insane. I can't be here right now." Without another word, he stormed out of the house, the door slamming behind him. Evelyn collapsed into sobs, and Maria found herself moving to comfort the woman who had once been her rival. As she held Evelyn, her own tears falling, Maria was struck by the absurdity of the situation. How had they ended up here, united in their grief and the mess John had left behind? As the night wore on and Lucas didn't return, a new worry gnawed at Maria. Evelyn, between bouts of tears, had revealed that Lucas had been struggling with his health. A recent diagnosis of a rare genetic disorder had left him facing an uncertain future and mounting medical bills. "He's been so strong," Evelyn said, her voice hoarse. "But the treatments, they're experimental. Insurance won't cover them. I've been trying to figure out how to help him." But Maria's mind raced. She had the means to help Lucas to potentially save his life. But doing so would mean revealing the truth to her own children, upending their lives as surely as Lucas's had been upended today. As she sat in Evelyn's living room, surrounded by the remnants of the life John had hidden from her, Maria faced an impossible choice. Should she return home, pretend this trip never happened, and protect her children from this painful truth? Or should she embrace Lucas as family, offer the help he desperately needed, and shatter the foundations of everything her children believed about their father? The weight of the decision pressed down on Maria like a physical force. She thought of her children, of the love and admiration they held for their father's memory. She thought of Lucas, alone and angry, grappling with a lifetime of lies and a future threatened by illness. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Maria made her choice. She would help Lucas whatever the cost. She couldn't change the past or erase John's mistakes, but she could choose compassion and love in the face of betrayal. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone and dialed Sarah's number. It was time to bring her children into the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As the phone rang, Maria steeled herself for the conversation that would change their lives forever. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds of Maria's hotel room, casting long shadows across the rumpled bed. She hadn't slept, her mind a tumultuous whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. The conversation with Sarah still echoed in her ears, the initial confusion, the dawning horror, and finally, the shocked silence that had stretched on for what felt like an eternity. "Mom, are you sure?" Sarah had finally managed to ask, her voice small and uncertain. Maria's heart had clenched at the pain in her daughter's voice. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I needed you to know." Now, as she mechanically packed her suitcase, Maria second-guessed every decision that had led her to this moment. Had she done the right thing in coming to Portland? In uncovering this secret? In telling Sarah? Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Sarah told me everything. We're on our way to Portland. Don't do anything until we get there." Maria's stomach lurched. She hadn't expected them to come here. How would they react to seeing Lucas in person? To meeting Evelyn? The thought of her children face-to-face with the living proof of their father's betrayal made her nauseous. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Evelyn, looking as exhausted as Maria felt. "Lucas came home," Evelyn said without preamble. He's not doing well. The stress of everything, on top of his condition." She trailed off, her eyes pleading. Maria nodded, understanding the unspoken request. "Let me grab my things. I'll come with you." The drive to Evelyn's house was tense, filled with unspoken words and shared worry. As they pulled into the driveway, Maria spotted a familiar figure sitting on the front steps, Lucas, his head in his hands. Approaching cautiously, Maria felt an overwhelming urge to comfort him, to somehow make this right. But what could she possibly say to ease the pain she had inadvertently caused? "Lucas?" she said softly. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and wary. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I'd like to talk, if you're willing." For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. They settled in the backyard, the morning air crisp and charged with unspoken emotions. Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. "I can't imagine what you're going through," she began. "Finding out about your father, about your siblings. It must be overwhelming." Lucas let out a bitter laugh. "Overwhelming doesn't begin to cover it. My whole life feels like a lie." Maria nodded, feeling the weight of her own shattered illusions. "I understand that feeling. When I found out about your father's, about you, it was like the ground disappeared beneath my feet." For the first time, Lucas really looked at her, curiosity mingling with the hurt in his eyes. "Why did you come here? Why tell me the truth now?" Maria considered her words carefully. "Because I believe you deserve to know. Because despite everything, you're family. And family should be there for each other." She saw the conflict play out across Lucas's face, the desire to connect warring with the anger and betrayal he felt. Slowly, haltingly, they began to talk. Maria shared stories of John the good and the bad, painting a picture of the complex man who had fathered them both. Lucas, in turn, opened up about his life, his dreams, and the health challenges that threatened to derail everything. As the morning wore on, Maria felt a tentative bond forming between them. It was fragile, born of shared pain and uncertainty, but it was there. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming. Maria's heart leapt into her throat as she saw Sarah and Michael walking up the driveway, their faces a mix of confusion and determination. "Mom!" Sarah called out, spotting them in the backyard. Her eyes locked on Lucas, widening in recognition. The next few moments were a blur of introductions and tense silences. Maria watched as her children came face to face with their half-brother, saw the shock and disbelief play out across their features. "This is insane," Michael muttered, running a hand through his hair. "How could Dad do this? How could he lie to all of us?" The hurt in his voice was palpable, and Maria felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. She had brought this pain into their lives, shattered the image they had of their father. As the initial shock wore off, the conversation turned to Lucas's health. Maria watched the conflict play out on her children's faces as they learned of his condition, of the experimental treatments that could save his life. "We have to help him," Sarah said suddenly, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "I know this is all crazy and messed up, but he's our brother. We can't just walk away." Michael nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Yeah, I guess you're right." The relief that flooded through Maria was almost overwhelming. She hadn't realized how terrified she'd been that her children would reject Lucas, would refuse to acknowledge this new, complicated reality. As the day wore on, tentative plans were made. They would pool resources to help with Lucas's medical expenses. They would take time to get to know each other, to navigate this new family dynamic. But as Maria watched her children interact with Lucas, saw the careful way they were trying to connect despite the pain and confusion, she was hit with a crushing wave of guilt. She had done this. She had upended their lives, forced them to confront a truth that would forever change how they saw their father, their family, themselves. That night, alone in her hotel room once more, Maria broke down. The tears she had been holding back for days finally came, racking her body with sobs. She cried for the life she thought she had, for the pain her children were experiencing, for the years Lucas had lived not knowing his true heritage. As she finally drifted off to sleep, emotionally and physically exhausted, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But as she thought of the way Sarah had hugged Lucas goodbye, of the quiet conversation she had overheard between Michael and Evelyn, she felt a glimmer of hope. They were family, bound by blood and now by shared pain. Somehow they would find a way through this together. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to paint the Portland sky when Maria's phone buzzed insistently. Bleary-eyed from another restless night, she fumbled for the device, her heart racing as she saw Lucas's name on the screen. "Maria." His voice was strained, barely above a whisper. I hate to ask this, but I need help. The hospital called. There's a spot open for the trial treatment, but I need to come up with the initial payment by the end of the week. I wouldn't ask, but my mom's already stretched so thin, and Lucas, breathe. Maria interrupted gently, her mind already racing. How much do you need? The figure he quoted made her breath catch. It wasn't an impossible sum, but it would mean dipping heavily into her savings. Money she had set aside for her own children's futures. I'll figure something out, Maria promised, her voice steadier than she felt. Just focus on getting ready for the treatment. Okay? As she ended the call, the weight of the decision before her felt crushing. She had the means to potentially save Lucas's life, but at what cost to her own children? To the future she had carefully planned? Maria's fingers hovered over Sarah's number, then Michael's. They had a right to know, to have a say in this decision that would impact all of them. But the memory of their conflicted faces, the raw pain in their eyes when they had met Lucas, held her back. Instead, she found herself calling the one person who might understand the impossible choice before her. Evelyn, it's Maria. Can we meet? An hour later, Maria sat across from Evelyn in a quiet corner of a local cafe. The woman who had once been her unwitting rival now looked small, exhausted, the weight of years of secrets and struggle etched into the lines around her eyes. Lucas called you, didn't he? Evelyn asked, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming mug of coffee. Maria nodded. He needs help with the treatment costs. I want to help him, Evelyn, but I'm torn. This money, it was meant for Sarah and Michael's futures, and they're still processing everything. If I do this without talking to them first. Evelyn reached across the table, grasping Maria's hand. The gesture, so unexpected, brought tears to Maria's eyes. I never wanted this for any of you, Evelyn said softly. John and we made so many mistakes, but Lucas, he's innocent in all of this. He doesn't deserve to suffer for our choices. Maria nodded, feeling the truth of Evelyn's words deep in her bones. I know, that's what makes this so hard. No matter what I choose, someone gets hurt. They sat in silence for a moment, two women united by love for a man who had betrayed them both, and by a shared concern for the children caught in the crossfire of that betrayal. Whatever you decide, Evelyn said finally, I want you to know how grateful I am. You could have walked away when you found out the truth. Instead, you've shown Lucas more kindness in a few days than John did in his entire life. Maria felt a complex surge of emotions at Evelyn's words, gratitude, sorrow, and a lingering anger at John that she wasn't sure would ever fully fade. As she left the cafe, Maria's mind was made up. She would help Lucas, consequences be damned. But first, she owed her children the truth. Back in her hotel room, Maria took a deep breath and dialed Sarah's number. As soon as her daughter answered, the words tumbled out, Lucas's condition, the opportunity for treatment, the financial need. Mom, slow down, Sarah interrupted. Are you saying you want to use our college fund to help him? Maria closed her eyes, bracing for the anger she was sure would come. Not all of it, sweetheart. But yes, I'm considering using some of the money to help with Lucas's treatment. I know it's a lot to ask, but do it, Sarah said, her voice firm. Michael and I talked last night. We figured something like this might come up. We want to help too. Maria felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by her daughter's compassion. Sarah, are you sure? This is your future we're talking about. Mom, Lucas is our brother. His future matters too. As Maria ended the call, her heart felt lighter than it had in days. She immediately reached out to Lucas, setting the wheels in motion for his treatment. That evening, as she sat with Evelyn, Lucas, Sarah, and Michael in Evelyn's living room, Maria felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would be challenging. There were still so many emotions to process, relationships to navigate, and hurdles to overcome. But looking at the faces around her, she saw not just the pain of recent revelations, but also determination, compassion, and the first tentative threads of a new kind of family bond. Lucas, his eyes bright with a hope he had nearly lost, stood up. I don't know how to thank you all, he began. his voice thick with emotion. When I found out about everything, I thought my world was ending. But now, I feel like maybe it's just beginning in a new way. As Maria pulled Lucas into a fierce hug, joined quickly by Sarah and Michael, she felt the weight of her decision lift. Yes, the future was uncertain. Yes, there would be challenges ahead. But in this moment, surrounded by the warmth of newfound family, she knew she had made the right choice. The scars of John's betrayal would always be there, but from those wounds, something beautiful and unexpected had blossomed, a family bonded not just by blood, but by choice, compassion, and the courage to face an uncertain future together. The sterile corridors of Portland General Hospital echoed with the steady beep of monitors and the hushed conversations of medical staff. Maria sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair outside Lucas's room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The past week had been a whirlwind of paperwork, medical consultations, and emotional conversations as they prepared for Lucas's experimental treatment. Sarah and Michael had flown back to Chicago, promising to return as soon as they could arrange time off work. Their absence left a palpable void, but Maria was grateful for the quiet moment to gather her thoughts. A soft touch on her shoulder startled her from her reverie. Evelyn stood there, holding 2 cups of mediocre hospital coffee. "Any news?" Evelyn asked, handing Maria a cup. Maria shook her head. "The doctor said it could be a few more hours before we know anything." They sat in companionable silence, united in their worry for Lucas. The past few weeks had forged an unlikely bond between them, a friendship born of shared pain and hope. Suddenly, the elevator doors at the end of the hall pinged open. Maria's heart leapt as she saw Sarah and Michael step out, looking tired but determined. "We couldn't stay away," Sarah explained as she hugged her mother tightly. "How's Lucas doing?" Before Maria could answer, a commotion from Lucas's room drew their attention. The door burst open, and Lucas stumbled out, still wearing his hospital gown, his face pale and drawn. "Lucas!" Evelyn cried, rushing to her son's side. "What are you doing? You need to rest." But Lucas's eyes were wild, fixed on something over their shoulders. Maria turned to see what had captured his attention and felt her blood run cold. There, frozen in shock at the end of the hallway, stood Tom Peterson, John's best friend and business partner. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Tom's gaze swept over the group, from Maria to Evelyn, to Lucas with his striking resemblance to John, to Sarah and Michael's confused faces. "Maria!" Tom's voice was barely above a whisper. "What's going on here?" The tension in the air was palpable as Maria struggled to find the words to explain the unexplainable. But before she could speak, Lucas broke away from Evelyn's grasp. "You," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You knew my father, didn't you? You knew about me?" Tom's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. "Don't lie," Lucas shouted, his fragile body shaking with the force of his anger. "You were his best friend. You must have known." The commotion drew the attention of hospital staff, who quickly surrounded Lucas, trying to calm him and lead him back to his room. But the damage was done. The truth that Maria had been struggling to contain had exploded into the open in the worst possible way. As Lucas was gently but firmly escorted back to his bed, Maria turned to face Tom, Sarah, and Michael. The shock and confusion on their faces was heart-wrenching. "I think we all need to talk," Maria said quietly, feeling the weight of years of secrets pressing down on her. They gathered in a small hospital conference room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Maria took a deep breath and began to explain everything. Finding the letters, discovering Lucas's existence, the decision to help with his treatment. As the story unfolded, Maria watched the emotions play across their faces. Sarah and Michael, who had known parts of the truth, still looked shaken by the full extent of their father's deception. Tom sat with his head in his hands, occasionally nodding as if confirming details he had long suspected. When Maria finished, the silence that followed was deafening. "I can't believe Dad would do this," Michael said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "And you, Tom?" You knew all along. Tom looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I suspected, he admitted. John, he confided in me about Evelyn years ago, but I never knew for sure about Lucas. I thought it was over, that he had ended things. And you never thought to tell us? Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. After Dad died, when we were all grieving, you didn't think this was something we deserved to know? Tom flinched at her words. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was protecting John's memory, protecting all of you. I see now that I was wrong. The conversation that followed was painful, raw, and necessary. Years of secrets and half-truths came to light as Tom shared what he knew of John's relationship with Evelyn, of the guilt and conflict that had torn his friend apart. As the truth unfolded, Maria felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The John that emerged from Tom's stories was a man she had never fully known, deeply flawed, torn between love and duty, haunted by the choices he had made. Hours passed as they talked, cried, and began the difficult process of reconciling the father and friend they had loved with the man who had caused so much pain. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital windows, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A tired-looking doctor entered, his face serious. Mrs. Thompson? It's about Lucas. We need to talk. Maria felt her heart drop as she followed the doctor out of the room, aware of the concerned gazes of her children, Tom and Evelyn following her. Whatever came next, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The truth was finally, fully in the light, and now they all had to face the consequences of John's choices, for better or for worse. The doctor's words echoed in Maria's mind as she stood outside Lucas's room, her hand hovering over the door handle. The treatment had been more taxing than anticipated, and Lucas's condition was critical. The next 24 hours would be crucial. Taking a deep breath, Maria pushed open the door. The sight that greeted her made her heart clench. Lucas lay pale and still, connected to a dizzying array of machines. Evelyn sat beside him, her hand gently stroking his arm, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. How is he? Maria asked softly, moving to stand on the other side of the bed. Evelyn looked up, her expression a mix of gratitude and despair. The doctor says we just have to wait and see. He's fighting, but... Her voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Maria reached across the bed, taking Evelyn's free hand in hers. The gesture, simple yet profound, spoke volumes about how far they had come. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. Sarah and Michael entered, their faces etched with concern. Behind them, looking hesitant and out of place, was Tom. Mom! Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. How's Lucas doing? Before Maria could respond, Lucas stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded his features as he took in the group gathered around his bed. Then, his gaze locked onto Tom, and a spark of recognition flared. You, Lucas said, his voice weak but filled with emotion. You knew my father. You knew about me. Tom stepped forward, his face a mask of guilt and regret. Lucas, I'm so sorry. I should have said something years ago. I should have. Should have what? Lucas interrupted, anger giving strength to his voice. Told me I had a father who didn't want me? A family I never knew? Why now? Why, when I might be dying, do you all suddenly care? The room fell silent, the weight of Lucas's words hanging heavy in the air. Maria felt tears prick her eyes, the full impact of their collective choices crashing down on her. It was Michael who broke the silence, stepping closer to Lucas's bed. You're right, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. We should have known about you long ago. Dad should have told us, Tom should have said something. But we're here now and we do care. You're our brother, Lucas. No matter what happened in the past, that's the truth now. Lucas's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a weariness that went beyond his physical condition. I don't even know what that means, he said softly. To have a family I never knew about, to be a brother to strangers. Sarah moved to stand beside Michael, "Then let us show you," she said, reaching out to take Lucas's hand. "We can't change the past, but we can be here for you now and in the future, if you'll let us." The tension in the room slowly began to dissipate as Lucas, Sarah, and Michael talked. They shared stories of their childhood, of the father they knew, and of the hopes and dreams they held for the future. Tom, encouraged by Maria, joined in, filling in gaps in the narrative of John's life that even Maria hadn't known. As the conversation flowed, Maria found herself watching Evelyn. The other woman's face was a canvas of complex emotions: relief at seeing Lucas connecting with his siblings, lingering hurt from years of secrecy, and a cautious hope for what the future might hold. Hours passed, and as night fell once again, a strange sense of peace had settled over the room. Lucas, exhausted but looking more alive than he had in days, had drifted off to sleep, his hand still clasped in Sarah's. Maria stepped out into the hallway, needing a moment to process everything that had happened. She was surprised to find Tom waiting for her. "Maria," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am for keeping John's secret, for not being there for you and the kids after he died, for everything." Maria studied the man before her, seeing not just John's best friend, but a person burdened by years of guilt and unspoken truths. "Tom," she said softly, "I won't pretend that what you didn't do, didn't hurt us. But I understand why you kept John's secret. You were trying to protect everyone, in your own way." Tom nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but seeing Lucas, seeing how much pain this has caused everyone, I realize now how wrong I was." Maria reached out, squeezing Tom's arm gently. "We can't change the past, Tom. All we can do is move forward, try to heal, and be there for each other now." As they stood there in the quiet hospital hallway, Maria felt a shift in the air, as if a great weight had been lifted. The truth was finally, fully out in the open. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and emotional hurdles. But for the first time since discovering John's letters, Maria felt a genuine sense of hope. She turned back towards Lucas's room, where her children, all of her children, were waiting. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family bound not just by blood, but by choice, forgiveness, and the courage to embrace an uncertain future. The soft beep of medical monitors provided a steady rhythm to the tense silence in Lucas's hospital room. It had been 3 days since the confrontation, and while Lucas's condition had stabilized, the emotional atmosphere remained fragile. Maria sat in the corner, watching as Sarah and Michael took turns reading to their half-brother from a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, Lucas's favorite book they had discovered. The scene before her was both heartwarming and surreal, a glimpse of what might have been if John had made different choices. A gentle knock at the door drew everyone's attention. Dr. Patel, Lucas's primary physician, entered with a cautiously optimistic expression. "I have some good news," she began, her eyes sweeping the room before settling on Lucas. "The latest test results show significant improvement. If this trend continues, we might be looking at a full recovery." The room erupted in a mixture of relieved laughter and tears. Evelyn, who had been dozing in a chair by Lucas's bed, jolted awake at the commotion. "Really?" Lucas asked, his voice hoarse but filled with hope. "You mean I'm going to be okay?" Dr. Patel nodded, her smile widening. "It's still early, but yes, that's what we're hoping for. The experimental treatment, combined with your incredible resilience, seems to be working wonders." As the doctor continued explaining the next steps in Lucas's treatment, Maria felt a complex surge of emotions wash over her. Joy at Lucas's improving health warred with a deep-seated guilt. If she hadn't uncovered John's secret, if she hadn't pushed to help Lucas, would he have had this chance at life? The celebrations continued well into the evening, with Tom joining them later, bringing takeout from Lucas's favorite local restaurant. As Maria watched her expanded family interact, Sarah and Michael trading childhood stories with Lucas, Evelyn and Tom cautiously rekindling an old friendship, she was struck by the bittersweet nature of the moment. Later that night, as the others had gone to get some much-needed rest, Maria found herself alone with Lucas. She perched on the edge of his bed, taking in the sight of him. The color had returned to his cheeks, and there was a spark in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "Thank you," Lucas said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for everything. I know this couldn't have been easy for you." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "Oh, Lucas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to thank me. I wish I had known about you sooner. That we all had." Lucas nodded, a shadow passing over his face. "I've been thinking about that a lot," he admitted, "about Dad and the choices he made. Part of me is still so angry with him, for denying me a family, for lying to everyone. But another part understands?" Maria finished gently. "Yeah," Lucas said, looking surprised. "Is that crazy? To understand, even a little bit, why he did what he did?" Maria shook her head, reaching out to take Lucas's hand. "No, it's not crazy, John. Your father, he was a complex man. He made mistakes, huge ones that hurt a lot of people. But he also loved deeply, even if he didn't always show it in the right ways." They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts about the man who had brought them together in such an unexpected way. "What happens now?" Lucas asked eventually, his voice small and uncertain. "When I get out of here, do we just go back to our separate lives?" The vulnerability in his question tugged at Maria's heart. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, squeezing his hand. "You're family now, if you want to be, that is. We can figure out what that looks like together. Okay?" Lucas nodded, a tentative smile spreading across his face. "I'd like that," he said softly. As dawn broke over Portland, casting a warm glow through the hospital windows, Maria felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still difficult conversations to be had, relationships to rebuild, and a lifetime of missed moments to reconcile. But looking at Lucas, seeing the hope and possibility in his eyes, Maria knew that they had made the right choice. The price of truth had been high, shattered illusions, painful revelations, and a fundamental reshaping of their family. But it had also brought them here, to this moment of new beginnings and second chances. As Sarah and Michael returned, bearing coffee and bagels, and Evelyn arrived with a stack of college brochures for Lucas to peruse, Maria was struck by the resilience of the human heart. They had weathered a storm of secrets and lies, and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. John's choices had set them on this path, but it was their own choices to forgive, to connect, to embrace a new and complicated reality that would define their future. As laughter filled the room, Maria closed her eyes, sending a silent thought to wherever John might be. "We're okay," she whispered. "It's not the family you planned, but it's beautiful in its own way. I hope you can see that." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of newfound connections and the promise of a future built on honesty and love, Maria felt truly at peace for the first time since finding those fateful letters. The truth had come at a high price, but as she looked at the faces of her expanded family, Sarah and Michael, Lucas and Evelyn, even Tom, Maria knew that it had been worth every painful moment. They had paid the price of truth, and in return, they had gained something precious beyond measure. A chance to redefine family on their own terms, bound not just by blood, but by choice, forgiveness, and the courage to love in the face of life's most challenging revelations. Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.